Welcome to How I Lead, a new series of interviews from Thomson Reuters. My name is Steve Acey, and I am the head of Canada for Thomson Reuters. In this series, I speak with leaders of the legal profession in Canada. I ask them how they've been successful and what best practices they have to share with other leaders. Today, I'm joined by Scott Jeffers, Vice President, Legal and Corporate Secretary at TransAlta. TransAlta is a Calgary-based electricity generator and wholesale marketer of electricity. It has approximately $3 billion in annual revenue and more than $10 billion in assets, operating in 3 countries. TransAlta is committed to clean energy and sustainability. The company announced that it will reduce its annual CO2e emission by 75% by 2015 levels by 2026. It has also strived to achieve a 100% mix of renewables and natural gas, with 70% of EBITDA coming from renewables. The company is already one of the largest producers of wind power in Canada and the largest producer of hydropower in Alberta. Scott's teams oversee corporate governance, disclosure and security and compliance matters, corporate/commercial legal matters, and trading compliance for the company. Scott has been with TransAlta for 11 years. Prior to that, he was an associate at a leading national law firm, practicing corporate and commercial law with an emphasis on public market transactions, including debt and equity financing and mergers and acquisitions. Scott holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Calgary, as well as an MBA and law degree from Dalhousie University. Scott, welcome to the program.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, I'd like to start from the beginning. Where did you grow up, and how did you decide to go to law school?
Yeah, so born and raised Calgary, one of the few, it feels like. And then, went to undergrad at UC, as you noted, did my Bachelor of Arts. Near the end of my Bachelor of Arts program, I became interested in commerce. I would read things like Liar's Poker and Barbarians at the Gate, and was wrapped up in kind of the intrigue around the corporate world at the time. I thought it would be an interesting place to dedicate some time and build a career, and thinking law would be the most accessible path into that type of environment. So really, yeah, it was just kind of the last couple of years of undergrad, got serious about my grades, got serious about getting into law school, and yeah, the rest is history.
So you went to the University of Calgary before you went to Dalhousie. I'm curious what made you choose Dalhousie, and then I also know that you're a law MBA student like me. Why did you decide to do that unique combination?
Yeah, so having a Bachelor of Arts and knowing I had an interest in commerce, I think the joint program really helped round out some of the corporate aspects. So I got more exposure to finance, accounting, HR, like just the general suite of kind of the business education. So I thought that was very valuable because I didn't necessarily have a lot of that in my undergrad, and I knew I wanted to kind of go into a corporate path. So that's what really drew me to the joint program. Dalhousie specifically, reputational at the time. I thought it was a really strong school. But I also liked the fact it was the furthest school I could get to from home. So it was literally the furthest away I could get from home while I'm going to law school in Canada. I remember, and I just fell in love with Halifax. I figured if I wanted to live in Ontario, I have opportunities to have a career there. I could work in Toronto, I could work in Vancouver. I didn't see an opportunity to really work or have a career in Halifax. So I really thought it was kind of a unique opportunity to live out on the East Coast and take in some of that culture. I remember I went out there with my dad when I was first seriously considering going there, just to see whether or not I even enjoy the East Coast. And we sat down at a pub, and a band gets on, which coming from Calgary was kind of unique in and of itself. And then they start playing a song and the whole bar starts singing along, and that's kind of new. I had to go to Halifax. So a great experience.
Absolutely. So then you joined the law firm. How do you decide what law firm to article with? Did you summer there? What was that experience?
Yeah, so It happens quickly, and I think that's still the case. So when I had started law school, I seem to recall, like, even before I had taken a law class, before I stepped into a single law class, I was hearing about application deadlines for summer programs. So I believe I was applying for summer programs in Calgary in September when I would have just started law, which was a little bit unique. But and then you go through the interview process. I was a first year law student, having just completed my first year of the MBA prior to that. Met with a number of the Calgary firms. Ultimately, it was offered a few summer positions that first year. Ultimately decided to go with Bennett Jones. And then that led to a second summer and articling, and then an offer for an associate. So it kind of happened fairly quickly, fairly naturally. I preferred Bennett Jones was kind of top of my list, just given I don't really keep up with the private practice market anymore, but certainly they were, and I believe still are, very highly regarded. They took on a lot of the complex, sophisticated corporate transactions, a bit of a heavyweight here in Calgary in particular, the largest firm in Western Canada. So all of that really appealed to me. So was ultimately an easy decision, and was grateful for it.
I want to get to your in-house career, but just one more on your associate, previous law firm experience. Any particular accomplishments or deals that you're especially proud of?
Yeah, I mean, a few come to mind. I was fortunate to be able to be pretty busy while I was there. I got to work with a lot of different partners and senior associates, all of whom I greatly respected and enjoyed working with. I remember when I was articling, Synovus, or Encana was breaking up into Encana and Synovus. So I got to be involved in that. There's a lot of work involved in that. It was a kind of a high profile transaction at the time. So really enjoyed seeing how that all came together, and being able to contribute to that. And then I saw some M&A, I saw IPOs. I saw an IPO that was, I believe at the time, the first concurrent IPO on New York and Toronto. So got to work with New York counsel, and that was a lot of work, very interesting. And then also, in addition, kind of the bigger projects you could get brought into, just being given the responsibility to kind of manage some of the smaller client matters, some of the, they kind of give you a client and just kind of say, run with it. If you get into trouble or if you need any help, let me know. And you kind of get to interact directly with the client. You're doing little private placements for them. You're helping them answer some questions, and you kind of develop a little bit more of the business relationship. So really enjoyed that as well.
So then you have a successful associate career. What makes you decide to go in-house, and how did the opportunity come about?
Yeah, so it's about, I was only in private practice for 4.5 years as an associate. So at that time, partner was 8 years. I was about halfway there, and probably about 10,000 hours in. And so it kind of gave me some pause being, I'm halfway there. If this is something I really want to pursue, become a partner, stay at the firm, I'll go for it. But it kind of gave me a moment to kind of think and reflect on my prior 4 years, the next 4 years ahead of me, and what it would take to be partner and to continue down that path. So having done my MBA, having an interest in business, I kind of I've always had an idea that I might move to more of a business role in the future. And so an opportunity came up at TransAlta. Didn't know if it was going to be the perfect fit. I was intrigued by the kind of the IPP space, the independent power producers. Kind of, it seemed like in a long runway. I recognized at the time there's a lot of pressure against oil and gas at the time, and which would have been the other kind of natural path for me to go with in an in-house career here in Calgary, at least. So I liked kind of the electricity markets. I felt like there would be a lot of growth. So I started talking to TransAlta probably over a couple of months. the things kind of worked out in a way where I got comfortable with what they were presenting, and kind of made the tough decision at the time to leave private practice.
So today you lead the law department at TransAlta. Along the way, you progressed through a number of roles in the department. What do you attribute your successful career growth to?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always an aspect of kind of luck and timing involved. I mean, opportunities, people might leave and might give you the opportunity to take on greater responsibility, and I think maybe a part of that. But I think really it's just coming in, being focused, being aligned with the goals of the organization, making sure that you're achieving outcomes, and you're not just kind of raising issues, you're also suggesting solutions and paths forwards, and really taking on accountability, really trying to move the ball forward. You really want to become known as someone who can kind of get things done and that they can trust and rely upon you. So I think that served me well. I think the experience I had at Ben & Jones certainly helped as well, just in terms of how I approach the law and approach complex projects. So I kind of attribute a lot of that to how I was able to progress within TransAlta.
I know you have a busy work schedule. I know you have a busy family schedule as well. How do you balance everything and maintain positive mental health?
It's a challenge. I don't know if I have the answer. I mean, I think the way I approach it is there's absolutely going to be times when you're busy, you're going to work late, you're going to work weekends, things need to get done. And that's just the nature of the role. So I think you have to have a certain level of acceptance in terms of the expectations and workload to a certain extent. But that's not always the case. I think you kind of have to, at least I try and keep in mind that not everything is of the same importance. You really got to prioritize your time. You can't get stressed out about everything. Not every email in your inbox is going to be equally important. You have to, I don't know, give your, work on things appropriately. If something is full and the client might be concerned about a particular matter, you just got to frame it and kind of place it in your own priority list. And I just see some lawyers who sometimes everything is of extreme importance and heightened sensitivity, and everything is just an extreme stress level. I think you got to just balance that with kind of a little bit more of a reasonable expectation in terms of what actually needs to get done within that time frame and what doesn't, and then just work accordingly.
That makes sense. So I'd like to learn more about TransAlta's law department now. Can you give us a little more detail on how it's structured and how it works?
Yeah, so there's 8 lawyers, as well as myself, and then our EVP of legal, who I report into. There's 5 corporate lawyers reporting into me, one of whom is in Australia. And then we have a regulatory lawyer, a litigation lawyer, and a lawyer dedicated to energy marketing, supporting our trade floor. Yeah, and then like I said, I report into the EVP legal, who also looks after external affairs and commercial.
And how would you describe the culture of the team?
It's good. I mean, first of all, I'm incredibly proud and impressed with the legal team we have at TransAlta. They are, without exception, bright, dedicated, smart, insightful, easy to work work well with the business. So I just can't say enough good things about the team. And we all work well together. So I think the culture is really kind of built on respect, and I think we take very seriously our role in the organization as well. So we're a trusted advisor. The business knows that they can come to us if they're in a pinch, and we really do try and help them out of, or help them with any kind of challenges that they're working on. So really, I think we're like built on respect, results oriented, and really kind of committed to the organizational goals as a whole.
Scott, I know from our previous conversations that you're a very metrics-driven leader. What are some of the key metrics that you track to assess the effectiveness of your own law department and then the effectiveness of outside counsel?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the kind of metrics we would employ would probably be more along the lines of qualitative. In terms of, we would be engaging with the business units quite regularly. I'd be speaking to the heads of the various business units. If ever I would catch wind of they need additional legal support or they're not getting the support that they need on a certain matter, that's really kind of probably the most relevant means by which we kind of address whether there's anything that needs to be done. But generally, like I said, the business units work really well with the legal team, and it's really just a very productive, positive relationship. So we used to often circulate little like survey monkeys. I forget exactly what they are. It's the various business units kind of like ensure the quality of service is to expectations. So that was another tool we had employed. And then just kind of doing regular check-ins, kind of reviewing work periodically, just kind of make sure that the legal team is performing well and really contributing. In terms of external legal, we're probably, we keep a very close eye on that. We do have a fairly significant legal budget relative to the size of TransAlta. Due in large parts of kind of the complex transactions we're constantly looking at, or the litigation that we seem to be in just through the ordinary course of business. So we do employ e-billing system. So we track average hourly rates. We look at partners versus associates on files. We look at number of law firms engaged, the amount of disbursements on any particular matter. So yeah, it's really sophisticated tools. We can really slice and dice the information to understand on any particular matter who's the top biller on that particular file, how are they staffing the various matters, and if, for instance, we're seeing a matter that is pretty partner heavy, we typically have conversations saying we got to bring in, not all this work needs to be done by the partner. We need to be more effective in how we allocate some of that work externally. And that type of tool really helps us have those conversations.
You've done something innovative in your corporate law department by documenting a set of standards for managing outside counsel. Can you give us just a high-level overview of what those standards are? Yeah,
so we did adopt billing guidelines, and again, just credit to the team. They really ran with it, developed a set of billing guidelines that we've sent to all of our relationship firms. And I kid you not, they're probably about 5 to 6 pages. There's probably like 120 items in the billing guidelines, and they cover everything from how billing should work. For instance, if services are provided and we don't get an invoice, or we get an invoice 90 days after the end of the month in which that services was provided, then we just simply reject the invoice. We need the invoices to be provided promptly to allow us to, for it to be fresh in our minds in terms of the work that was provided and an understanding of what was provided at that point in time. Because sometimes you see invoices come in like 6 months later and people have moved on, they've kind of forgotten even what the engagement pertained to, and it makes our job very difficult in terms of assessing what we received and whether it was appropriate. So that's certainly one thing we include in there. We speak to disbursements. We would limit, sometimes firms have different expectations in terms of what the cost of printing might cost from what we would expect. So we kind of set that within our billing guidelines. We talk about, again, kind of the allocation of the work with expectations that they allocate the file appropriately, including utilizing students and associates as appropriate. And then we even have a section on ED&I. We do take ED&I, equity, diversity, and inclusion very seriously at TransAlta. And just as our shareholders put pressure on TransAlta to adopt those types of principles, we feel it appropriate to put the same pressure on some of our firms. So we do emphasize 89 principles. We like to see diverse staffing on files, and have that reflected in our billing guidelines as well.
I know that you also use fixed fee agreements, probably more so than many other companies. What types of matters do you use fixed fee agreements for, and what best practices have you identified there?
Yeah, so probably the two that come to mind that we really like utilizing fixed fee arrangements for. The first is just like routine run-of-the-mill type work where it's a pretty clear defined scope of work. It's recurring in nature. And there I'm thinking of review of MD&A or annual disclosure documents or circular. The law firm should have a pretty good idea of what it takes to do a form check, take a look at your risk factors, and provide comments on those suite of documents. So for those, we would be, and do often ask for fixed fee arrangements. Comparably, like if we're renewing a base shelf prospectus, we'd be looking for fixed fee arrangements. So I'm kind of thinking of the ones that are probably a little bit closer to my specific area, but those are the ones that we've used in the past successfully. Provides cost certainty. And then the second type of work that we use fixed fee arrangements for are maybe a little bit more complex, maybe transactional in nature, but small, so that they may not be able to justify or be able to really warrant a significant legal bill. So if we're looking at a small transaction, maybe a couple $1 million, we can't spend $1 million on legal fees, obviously. So we need to go into those types of arrangements with a fixed fee in mind, and then just work with the firm. And if things come up, just make sure that we're both in agreement in terms of what the appropriate amount of the fees are, what the expectations are, but certainly setting the expectation up front that on those types of arrangements, we need to be lean and we need to be efficient.
I'd like to touch on your technology strategy. How are you leveraging technology to drive efficiency for TransAlta?
Yeah, so I talked about the e-billing system, which we've been very pleased with. It allows us, again, to have access to information we just didn't have a few years ago. So in terms of our external legal spend, it's really helpful in terms of budgeting and everything like that. So e-billing is certainly one of them. We've also recently, we have an e-contracts type system. So we've recently been implementing that over the last couple of years. It's kind of a corporate-wide corporate or contract database, which is very helpful to kind of have a central repository where before people might have been saving them in folders or SharePoints and it wasn't clear where we should be looking for various documents. So now we've centralized that. So that's been helpful. And it also provides some functionality like diarizing. So if you put a contract in, you can diarize certain specific dates. So if a warranty period is falling off, you can remind yourself to have a look at that. Or if the contract needs renewal, you put those all into your diarization. And it prompts the relevant people to look at the provision and make sure that nothing goes unnoticed. And then the only other technology we've recently been employing as well is really cleaning up how we're managing our policies internally. So we manage the corporate policies. We've implemented a software to, rather than just, and we would have a number of policies, as I'm sure a lot of large organizations would, covering a number of things from HR to administrative matters to finance to it just things even like the code of conduct and kind of the more fundamental type policies. So we've taken that off and really kind of again centralized that through this electronic platform that we put in the review dates, we put in the when they're up for next review, and then it just prompts people to say, okay, you get notifications almost every day if you're not updating your policy. So it encourages them to go in, update their policy. They send the changes through the approval process. It ultimately comes back to me, and then I get to approve it, and it goes up on the portal and it becomes final. So that type of process has been very successful and ensures that policies are being reviewed timely. Sometimes policies have been kind of sitting on someone's desk for years and they're out of date. So that type of automation has really helped us make sure that policies are remaining up to date and effective.
I noticed that TransAlta documents its ESG goals on its website. What role does your law department have in TransAlta's ESG initiatives?
Yeah, so I mean, ESG is obviously a very buzzy word right now. A lot of people want to talk about it, but it's probably something TransAlta has been doing probably before it was even known as ESG. And maybe I'll start a little bit backwards in terms of starting with the governance aspect of it. So, I mean, as corporate secretary and kind of within the legal function, governance is nothing new. It's kind of central to the role and what we're trying to achieve here at TransAlta. So, I mean, in terms of the governance aspect, we, again, I mentioned the policies. So we look at policies throughout the organization, including those impacting the board all the way down to the employee level. But we look at the board level, we're always looking at recruitment, the skills matrix, work closely with the chairs of the various committees and chair of the board. If we have new directors joining, we have a very deliberate orientation schedule that is fairly intensive to make sure that they're getting the information they need as they join the board. As well as director recruitment, so that we're just making sure that we're very deliberate in our director recruitment to make sure that we do have the appropriate skills within the board and able to really advance the strategy of the organization. So yeah, and I mean, governance has kind of been governance since 2001 when really people started focusing on it. So. But it's something we've taken seriously. We've really tried to strengthen our disclosure in terms of not only just adopting good governance practices, but really relaying exactly what it is that we're doing on that front. On the social side, ED&I comes to mind. We do have an ED&I charter, a commitment. We have a workplace diversity policy. We have targets for women in the workplace across the organization as well as on the board. And we have an ED&I council. I was on the inaugural ED&I council. My term expired last year, but I was replaced by another lawyer on the team who I was happy to see join that group. And she's really presenting the legal perspective to that council and some of the work that the ED&I team is doing. And I do think there's a lot of role for the legal team to play in advancing some of those ED&I goals and initiatives. And then on the environmental side, which probably attracts the most attention, I mean, TransAlta is in a transition from 5 years ago, we were predominantly coal-fired generating electricity company. We thought we would have had, when I joined the company, certainly, we would have thought we'd have another 25 years with some of these units. And now we're off coal entirely in Canada. So a pretty quick shift in strategy. The only coal we're currently running is in the US under contractual arrangement with the state of Washington, which is expected to retire or will retire in 2025, at which point in time we'll be off coal entirely. So a pretty fundamental change generally in terms of our emission profile. Our emissions have come down significantly over the last 5 years as a result. I think we're probably certainly one of, if not the most, the largest company to reduce its emissions just in terms of tons of CO2 equivalent within the last 5 years, just given our conversion from coal to gas. So seeing a lot of real results on that end. And then just in terms of the disclosure, like the disclosure frameworks around the environmental in particular has developed a lot over the last year. I believe just recently the we have additional accounting standards relating to the environmental disclosures, so something we're well aware of and looking to really kind of achieve best practices on that front. So the unique aspect with how we were reporting environmental matters in particular is we actually integrate it within our MD&A. So unlike a lot of companies that just have a separate sustainability report that falls outside of their MD&A, we actually bring it all together. So it's within our continuous disclosure. It's subject to our CEO, CFO certifications, and it is presented equally with all of our financial results. So, so obviously a lot of work within the legal team to kind of review those materials, get comfortable with what we're saying, ensuring it's accurate, and then, yeah, and then releasing it. And I think we've been doing the integrated report for probably about 7 years now. So, yeah.
Well, Scott, I want to be respectful of your time, so I'll transition to the last section here about talent. First of all, give me the pitch. Why should a lawyer consider coming to work at TransAlta's legal department?
Yeah, good question. And I think I touched on it a little bit earlier as well. Just the industry that TransAlta is in is at a real crossroads. I mean, everyone's talking about carbon, everyone's talking about climate change and what we're doing to tackle that. And at a company like TransAlta, you're really at the forefront of that. You're, as I noted, we're seeing coal coming offline, being replaced by natural gas. But then, I mean, we're also developing, everything we're looking at now is generally renewables. So we're building 500 megawatts of wind in Oklahoma currently. We're commissioning wind farm in Alberta right now. And it's just the proliferation of renewable generations is huge. The incentives that we're seeing allocated to renewables, whether it's in the US under the Inflation Reduction Act or here in Canada, is really propelling and helping support this build out of renewables. So we're seeing a lot of capital investment, a lot of excitement in terms of the development of the electricity sector generally. So a lot of change, but there's still a lot of uncertainty that we're working through. It's not a known path at this time, I would suggest. Like there's questions around reliability and affordability and what is the technology to really get us to net zero? Is it carbon capture and storage? Is it batteries? Is it hydrogen? And we're right now making decisions that will inevitably impact the TransAlta is 100 years old, and the decisions we're making now will certainly lead us down the path for the next 100 years. And for the sector generally, whether or not batteries are the solution or whether or not carbon capture or whatever that future technology may be. And within the next 10 years, we're going to start seeing where that's going to start working and where those investments are going to start really being made. So it's an exciting time. And I think for the legal team in particular, I mean, we're central to that. Like we're in on the first day when we're signing confidentiality agreements with the various counterparties, all the way through to product negotiation and even in execution and then when you're managing the contracts, whether you have a power purchase agreement, we're constantly supporting the commercial team in terms of the interpretation of that and the enforcement of our obligations. So sophisticated work, interesting times, and really just kind of moving the company towards kind of the general direction of like where society is trying to get to with net zero and carbon reduction. So it's a generally rewarding place to work, both individually in terms of the work you would see, as well as just kind of the type of work that you're doing. So, yeah.
Well, Scott, you've had a very exciting and successful career. What TransAlta is doing seems very exciting, and like you said, your department is central to that. Last question for me: if someone wanted to replicate your career journey, let's say they're in law school now, they're looking at working in a law firm and then potentially moving in-house one day, what advice would you give to them? What do you wish you had known back when you were at Dalhousie?
Yeah, good question. I think, geez, I probably do a few things differently, I suppose. But the things I would be recommending to, I suppose, a lawsuit in this case would be who was interested in pursuing kind of more corporate path, whether in-house or a private practice, would be work hard, study. Like sometimes just table stakes getting into the interview process with some of these larger firms is just having good grades, to be perfectly honest. So work hard, and that continues. So just developing good practices around work ethic and getting the work done. And I mean, certainly serves people well, just generally as a kind of a table stakes. Then if you are interested in kind of a corporate path, I do think the time I had in private practice was very helpful. I'd encourage people to spend a little bit of time in private practice. I always kind of looked at it as even if you don't like the big firm environment, but think you might want to move in-house one day or maybe move to a smaller shop, it's always easier to start big and then maybe move down a tier or to a smaller boutique firm if that's your inclination. So it kind of make sure that the decisions you're making open up doors, don't necessarily close them. I've always kind of approached things along those lines. So even when you go to law school, like you don't have to become a lawyer, but it opens a lot more doors than it closes. So you're kind of expanding your career or your career opportunities. And then when you do move in-house, if that's the decision, really take the time to understand the business. Don't just be a lawyer doing your little niche work and trying to be fairly narrow in terms of what it is you're trying to do. Take the time to learn the business and be a contributing team member of the team, and don't be afraid to make decisions, make the recommendations, and put your hand up and really try and make some decisions that can move the needle forward in terms of progressing a project or the strategy.
That's very useful. Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate your time today. It sounds like you've got a lot going on and your department's very busy and successful. So I really appreciate the time you gave me. Thank you again.
Yeah, no, thanks. It was great chatting with you. Take care.